I set myself a challenge. Could I create my first ever game in an engine I'd never used in just 2 weeks in time for Halloween?
How hard can it be?
Let's find out, so I opened Godot. I knew I wanted to create a wave defense shooter, so I started by following tutorials to create a first-person controller that could strafe, slide and crawl. Next, I added my first enemy to the game. As this is a wave defense game, a simple zombie had to be the first enemy. I added a variety of animations to the zombie from Mixamo, including a stand-up animation, a run, attack and a death animation where the zombie despawns underground. With a first-person controller, an enemy and a basic world, it was time to add my first gun to the game. Finally, it felt like the game was coming to life as I could test spawning and killing zombies, and of course there were some interesting bugs along the way.
Fly away my pretties!
With guns and enemies, it was time to start on a weapon manager so that the player could switch weapons. I also wanted the player to have to keep moving around the level while they were playing, so I worked on the ability for weapons to run out of ammo. Ammo crates would respawn in the world on a fixed timer so that the player could pick them up and reload their weapons, and this encouraged the player to keep on the move. With the ammo system in place, I added some additional weapons with different clip sizes, and I played the game to make sure that each weapon ran out of ammo. When a gun does run out of ammo, the player either needs to find an ammo crate or switch their weapons. With the game coming together, I needed to add a flexible way of creating and spawning waves of enemies, so I used a JSON file for each wave. The JSON lets me specify how many enemies to spawn, arrange the health and the amount of time to wait before spawning, and of course no wave defense game would be complete without being able to kite enemies. Godot then reads each wave file in a particular game directory and spawns enemies at different spawn points, and long term this is a great way for players to create their own levels. Next, I added a start menu to the game that lets players start the game, choose options or exit. With options, I wanted to try and make my game as accessible as possible, so I added the ability to rebind controls and also reset those to the default. When a player starts the game, they're shown a loading screen while the game starts. At the moment, there's no way for the player to be killed, so I added the ability for enemies to damage the player and then kill the player.
He died?
Expanding on the start menu, I added options to graphics and audio such as toggling full screen. I also wanted to add more game feel to the levels, so that when the player slides over an ammo crate the screen turns green, or when a player is attacked by an enemy the screen turns red. And this is achieved by a simple UI element that we can toggle on and off. To keep track of player progress, I added this scoreboard to the game. Next, it was time to add a lot more enemies to the game and set up their animation state machines. For this again, I went to Mixamo, selected a load of different animations and then individually went through each character one by one, adding their animations and setting up their state machines so that they'd switch between animations seamlessly. It's the day of Halloween and time is running out, but with enemies, waves, weapons, health, a main menu and a score system in the game, it was time for a bit more of a fun bit, designing levels and making the game start to look good. I know if I had time, I could come into each individual system later and polish them. So, with that all in mind, let's cue the build music. At this point, it was Halloween, and despite all of my work so far, I had failed my challenge of completing my first game in just 2 weeks. The time was up. Despite missing my deadline, I decided to continue and keep developing on the game. I really wanted to be able to say that I had published and released my first game, but so many of us developers struggle to complete projects. So after a few days, I picked myself back up and restarted development. So I downloaded some terrain editing tools for Godot that would help me improve the environment and the level. Next, I worked on this Reaper wave attack. The Grim Reaper is the final boss in the level, and I wanted them to be able to have a slam attack. When they slam their scythe into the ground, I wanted a wave to spread out from around them that the player would have to jump and avoid. I love the effect in game of the Reaper wave. I think it looks amazing, exactly what I was hoping for. Players have to move around and avoid the wave, otherwise they get injured. Finally, it was time to add those final touches, like improving auto systems earlier, adding audio and making the level just a bit more spooky.
Spooky.
I added this volumetric fog to the level, and I think you'll agree it has an amazing effect at making the whole environment just look that bit more spooky. It's amazing how it all comes together right at the end. At this point, I improved auto systems from earlier, added a better main menu, and got started on a trailer. My objective all along has been to create and publish my first game within 2 weeks, and while I didn't quite meet that deadline, I was still determined to release the game even though it was now past Halloween. So I got to work and started making an itch.io page where I could host my game and publicise it. The last step was to finish off that trailer so that I could add it to the itch.io page, and I'll play it in the video now. So, in just over 3 weeks, I've used a Godot engine to create my first ever game and trailer, and I love the engine. You can download my game, Hallowave, from itch.io, and I'd love to hear your feedback. I can't wait to share with you what I'm working on next. And remember,
No, never give up, never surrender.